Hi guys, welcome back to another Train Brave podcast. I'm Renee McGregor.
And I'm Chris Hendy.
And today, guys, I'm going to talk about something that actually is quite hard to talk about. But I was in conversation with a friend of mine over the weekend, Kimberly Wilson, who some of you will know as Food and Psych on Instagram. And she's an incredible and very knowledgeable clinical psychologist. And Kimberly and I do quite a lot of work together, and we often sort of do a bit of reflective practice together because we have similar type of clients. But we were talking about something. We were actually talking about obviously the events that have happened in America over the last few weeks, and we were talking about moral courage. And it's never really struck me before, but Kimberly spoke about the fact that if you don't stand up and talk about something that is important and needs to be talked about and needs to be addressed, then you're not showing moral courage, and with that you're not really taking responsibility, and to a certain degree you're not really acting like an adult, to be fair. And so this is why this sort of conversation has occurred. So Chris and I have been chatting all over the weekend. Chris and I always talk about our practice. We're constantly reviewing it. We're constantly trying to improve it. We're using the latest research. And there's been some really good papers that have come through just in the last few weeks around exercise dependency, going back to training after you've had an eating disorder, RED-S and how you manage it. And then we were looking at all that, trying to make sure that we were putting the right practices in place. And it's come to my attention that obviously more and more and more people are talking about RED-S, more and more people are talking about eating disorders in sport, which is fantastic. And I'm over the moon that we're talking about it, we're raising awareness about it, and hopefully people are getting more and more support. However, I'm also really worried because remember that a little knowledge can actually be quite dangerous if you don't know how to use it properly. And I know, like Chris, you have a lot of examples of that in the coaching world where, a little bit of information doesn't fully represent the overall goal or the overall outcome that people are looking for, and can be quite dangerous. So I'm going to bring you in to kind of hear your thoughts on that. But basically, guys, we're going to talk today a little bit about some of the misinformation that's being put out there and some of the concerns we have, and actually what a responsibility we do have to our clients and to our following, and also to our careers. Like, I don't know if any of you know, but as a registered dietitian, I have to be incredibly careful about the information I put out there, and I have to be, everything has to be evidence-based and kind of backed up with research, but also with clinical experience, because without that, I could lose my registration. It's no difference to a medical malpractice suit or anything, like from that point of view. So I get upset when I see people within the profession who kind of want to jump on the bandwagon and provide information, but actually don't really understand the full extent of what's going on.
Yeah, this podcast, this topic we've been talking about, we've kind of gone off on quite a few different tangents because obviously it's something that's we're both quite passionate about. And again, I apologise, guys, if we do go off on random tangents. It's because obviously we're quite passionate about this, and it is based on our careers. Like we are, we were on the front line. We work hard to build relationships with individuals, and when it comes to kind of the amount of information out there and how it's delivered, and often it can be cherry picked. A lot of information is cherry picked and delivered to empower individuals. Like, so, a coach to an athlete, they'll cherry pick something, and they'll a new exercise or a new piece of research, but they'll do it kind of in the best interest of the athlete, but they don't think about the ramifications of suggesting a new diet or suggesting a new food group or suggesting a new way to train. And when you cherry pick like that, and when you kind of bounce around as a coach, as a coach or as a figurehead or a professional, you really need to be aware of the amount of power that you're wielding. And obviously that's something that me really constantly back and forth with each other about how we talk, how we verbalize, our thoughts, because obviously, you know, we read a lot, we've got years of experience behind us, and but yet, you know, we still have to think about how we approach every single one we work with, because everyone's got a different story and and we have to have a different approach to it. So, you know, when you have that very generalist approach to coaching or to working in a clinic, you know, it's you know, you've got to understand that that individual has a life, has a story behind them, and you can't just have those kind of general, you know, you can't have those can't just be general with them. You have to be mindful about how you approach it. So I think me and Rini met on Friday. We sit down, and we sit down quite regularly, but we had to sit down on Friday, and we literally screened everything we've been doing recently. You know, we literally filtered everything we're doing, our processes, what could be better, what could we need to improve on, you know, how are we currently delivering our information between the clients that we work with, how better can we approach it, you know, what aren't we taking in consideration yet, what are we maybe saying too much of, you know, like there's so many things that go on, and if it's coming from one place, one mind, one thought, if there's only one thought process, you know, you're going to struggle to take all those different elements in. And obviously that's where I guess me and really kind of work hard, make sure that we're kind of, well, we're using each other and our physio team and our psychologists that we work with to help us across all areas.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, we were saying, you know, one of the things that you know, we were discussing on Friday was, because we've got, obviously we're getting more and more people interested in working with us and wanting to support, which is great, and you know, it's what we've set out to do. We were trying to think of ways in which we could maximize that to a certain degree, and help more people without it meaning that we had to work more hours as such, because we're already at full capacity. And one of the things that I have, you know, I have real issues with is that RED-S and eating disorders, because, you know, they can be two separate things, are really complicated. They're not just a simple, oh, it's low energy availability, you're not quite matching your requirements, so as long as you eat this many calories, you'll get your period back, or your testosterone level will increase. Like, we have so many case studies where it's just not as simple as that. And that's what I mean by, you know, you can understand the theory, but if you're not a clinician, if you are not have any experience of responding to what is in front of you, then you can't really deliver what is required. So if it was as simple as eat more calories, then actually probably over 50% of the people that come to us have been told by their GPs, oh yeah, your periods are low, or your testosterone levels are low because you're not eating enough calories, so just increase your calories. I get that, I understand that approach, because that's kind of what the theory says. But if that was the case, then those people's hormones would return to normal, if they practice what they preach. The difference is that it's not always just about calories. It's also about what's going on psychologically for that person. It's about their belief systems. It's about their anxieties. It's about how far and how deep their issues are in terms of their physical deficiencies. It's so much bigger than just eat more calories. And I guess that's where my concern is, because as more and more practitioners jump on the bandwagon, and I'm going to say that, jump on the bandwagon of RED-S, again, it's like everything else in nutrition, and it really infuriates me. It becomes dumbed down. It becomes made very, very simple. And then at the end of the day, it's the individual in the center of that. It's the client that suffers. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not acceptable.
If you spend 5 minutes with that individual and talk about, they'll just increase the calories, you can just see their mind explode. You can see almost like the fireworks going off, can't you? Because they're thinking, well, what does that look like? What food do I eat? Like this, a million questions go through their head. But to dumb it down, it's like saying, just train more, just train harder. it's like such an ambiguous thought. Like it creates a cascade, as your the word that you often use, that cascading effect of questions, of thousands of questions. And if you truly understand your demographic that you're working with, the individuals that you're working with, you know that that's going to create even more confusion. You're not helping that individual at all by giving them that kind of general thought, because that thought has obviously, they're not that silly, they're not that, they're kind of aware of it, but they don't know how to apply that. It's like, to get stronger, you need to just lift more weight, or you need to be, you need to just train harder. There's so much more complexity to that, and that's the thing, right? It's such, and obviously, again, social media, all these people on speaking, posting these lovely little infographics and talking about working with individuals. They do not work with anyone. They're talking. This is where I'm going to get passionate, because they don't talk with anyone. When you work on the front line, when you're working with people on a daily basis, having conversations every other hour of every weekday, you know that the complexity of the issue is it's much more than just basic principles. Like, we can give principles till we're blue in the face. Rini, we talk about carbohydrates, how important they are. We talked about what does those carbohydrates look like. Like, we know this. Like, it's kind of common. Like, most people have that. But that still doesn't help, because you still need to find you need to dig deeper. We need to help these individuals, and that's where the magic is. That's where the coaching is. And so much of this, like whether it's training and coaching, whether it's working in the clinic, like, people just simply do not respect it, and they do not respect the ramifications of what they're saying either. I think that's a real, for me, it rolls me up on a daily basis. People just being told to do X, and they don't really know how that individual's doing it, how they're applying that knowledge, that principle. And so as a result, they're probably going to be doing it wrong, and they're going to be hurting themselves, or they're going to be doing it completely backwards.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about this before, and again, there's been a lot of posts. I think last week was I can't remember the exact term of the week, but it was like menstrual cycle awareness week or something. So there were a lot of influencers posting about your menstrual cycle and the importance of your menstrual cycle, and having it, and like how you should tailor your nutrition and your training to your menstrual cycle. They haven't got the qualifications.
Where's this come from? Yeah.
Doing that, and that worries me, because it becomes N=1, right? And like, people say to me often, really, why don't you post about your training on Instagram? Why don't you tell us what you eat? Why don't you give us more of who you are? And the answer is, because I'm N=1, and I've worked out what works for me, and I'm still working out what works for me. And I talk to you, and I talk to my friends, and I talk to my mentors to make sure that I'm accountable and I'm doing things appropriately, because we all have the tendency to go off in a direction sometimes. And like, you and I had a really good conversation this morning before my training session, and you asked me how I was. I said, actually, I'm feeling really good, really, really strong, but I've had a big week of training for me. Like, it was a big week of training, and bigger than I've done for a long time. I'm really chuffed that my body has held together, and I've done it, and I'm feeling good. But as you quite rightly said, you know what? We're going to just pull back today a little bit, because we need you to not keep pushing. And I think that's also so important, is the dialogue that you have with the people that you trust. So for me, if I couldn't ask you questions, Chris, there would be no point you and I working together. So like, when you say to me, we're going to do this, or I want you to think about this, and even sometimes you give me exercises and I go, I don't like those, but the very fact that I'm comfortable with our relationship, I can ask you, and I can say, like, well, why am I doing this? I need, and that is so important. As an athlete, you also have the right to ask questions of where your training is coming from, what the people around you, like, I have no problem when clients will come back to me and go, well, why am I doing this? Why have you suggested that there? And why are you, and why have you suggested that there? And what is that about? And I will happily explain it. And I'd much rather people ask questions, because that means that they are learning and they're taking responsibility for themselves, and they're starting to understand how their body works as well. But so many clients and athletes are almost fearful of having that conversation with their coaches or the practitioners they're working with. But equally, I think some coaches who are not necessarily maybe as experienced, or they just want to please, they will also, if an athlete says to them, right, I want to run 100 miles this week, and yet they've never done 100 miles before, they've done like 60 or 70, they'll go, okay, cool, we'll put that into your plan. I mean, how irresponsible is that?
But you've got to have I think you've got this old school mentality of coach, right, who is just authoritarian. You know, they will just literally, they used to, you don't question your coach, you just get on with it, right? And it's just that military mindset. And a lot of coaches are still behaving that way, where they still think that's like, you know, it's a position of power. And so wherever they say goes, right? And so, but that's not a relationship. You haven't built a relationship there. That person literally just, you know, is going to listen to it and do what you say. And that is a position of power. But people wield it very, very, very poorly, and we see it on a daily basis. And what I have to have from people I work with, I need them to challenge me. I need them to say, "Hey, Chris, I'm not sure. You know, like, you know, the schedule that we're following at the moment, it just doesn't fit my lifestyle at the moment. Can we change things up? You know, like that exercise, just, you know, that I'm not super comfortable with it. Can we just go through that again? Like your program is adaptable. It should be adaptable. Your relationship, you know, all relationships need constant work, right? Like no matter who you're with, like your partner, whoever, your children, they're always adapting. What we see is this still in the sporting world is this old school mentality where it's like, you need to do X, Y, and Z 3 times a week, hard as you can, keep, you know, and don't change things up. And if you start getting injured, just leave it alone for a minute and then come back in a couple of weeks and give it a crack again. There's no real adaptation. They're not really taking into consideration all those other variables, which make that coach athlete relationship so special. And I think so that it's an old school mentality still being kind of still in the mix, where, you know, it's just you will do what I say, and then it's not the ability for the athletes to still not ask questions. That you as an individual should feel comfortable enough with your coach that you should be able to say, I'm not sure if that's, you know, that's going to work for me, or don't be afraid to ask, you know, because that's where that's where often the magic is, right? That's where real adaptations happen, because you start to really trust your coach. You really start to understand your athlete. That's when you really start to kind of harness your true ability of yourself. So it's,
Yeah, and also like from a purely, like, when I first started training with you, I was slightly skeptical. We know that. I wasn't 100% sure that strength training was actually going to help me in any formal manner. But because I asked questions, like, why am I doing this? What's this going to do? And for me, I think we've had this conversation before, I'm quite a visual person. So when you're saying to me, when we do this exercise, basically you're strengthening this bit, you're creating this, because that's what you need when you're running down a mountain. As soon as you say that to me, I'm like, okay, cool. I can understand that. I can understand the logic behind that, and that fits and works for me. So I think even you've said it yourself, sometimes you've seen me actively correct myself in the gym because I'm obviously working out and going, actually, Chris has said I'm supposed to be engaging this bit of my body, but I don't feel that right now. Okay, well, if I move like, and that's what's going on in my head, like, you know, that's the thing. But it's because I've asked questions.
yeah, and you'll often come to me and say, "Look, Chris, I read this at the weekend about this particular movement, or this research was stating this about strength training," and I'll be like, "Yeah, okay, that's an interesting point. You know, what was the study sample? You know, who were we looking at? You know?" And it was like, "Oh yeah, it was 8 men." I was like, "Okay, cool. Well, you know, obviously, what you know, were they running mountains? Were they, you know?" So it's that whole thing where there's like it's open discussion, right? And like as student athletes, which most of the people listening here are because you are, you know, people that want to learn more about your body, you want to advance yourself in some shape or form, like you're always going to be thirsty to learn more, and it's those discussions with your coach that you should have. And like it's like that ability to to have that is everything. And for you, like, I think going just carrying on that point is when it comes to people using research, like we had this snowboard at the weekend for us, didn't it? We talked about people using research as kind of to leverage a point or to reinforce a point, but not actually really fully understanding the actual study itself and the study sample.
I think that's, I mean, obviously when when you take on any sort of degree and then masters and so ongoing, you have to learn to critically appraise a paper. Now, I do a lot of peer review stuff, so I'm asked by certain journal to review articles or review studies before they go into the journal. So I have to have really good knowledge of looking at a paper, understanding the sample size, looking at the methodology they've used. Does the statistics add up? Like I have to do that quite regularly, and then we have to accept or reject, and we have to provide comment to the author. It's quite a brutal process, because sometimes, like, you know, that somebody has been collecting that data for like 2 years, and you've basically gone, do you know what? It's too subjective. It's not objective enough. But fundamentally, if we are to use research in our practice, then the research has to be of relevance to the practice. And one of the things that was really great when I did work up at Bath Uni was I developed a really good relationship with the academic, the kind of the biochemistry, sports science academic department up there, who were doing all the teaching, but they also did a lot of research. And I used to have regular meetings with the academic department, because they'd be like, we want to test this hypothesis. Is that practical? Is that something that's going to be relevant? I mean, that's basically, I think, how science should be working, is that the academics and the clinical practitioners should be, or the people in practice should be working together to ask the questions we need to answer, not just deciding that, oh, well, I quite like the idea of understanding this particular theory, which may never be of relevance in the real world.
Because people take what they read and they run with it. They literally run with it. And this is the point that we're trying to make here, is that, like, just because it says something in a journal does not mean it's gospel, and it's going to, you can apply it to any group. You know, like, if it's a group of men that take part in the study and they show that their squat, their leg strength increases in an 8-week program using back squat, that's still not going to apply the same to a group of 8 women. Like, it's, you take what you've got to have the ability as a coach, as an educated person, to read. If you are going to read the research, is to take it and go, okay, that is based on this. And again, it's that whole thing where you not one size fits all. And so many people have this same approach, where they apply these broad, very, very broad principles to an entire group. And, you know, from their programming, just recycling programming and just hoping it works for men and women alike. Like, I'm going to throw it out there. I reckon a lot of the women that we work with are in the place they're at is because they've been trained like a man for they've been training with men for a long time, and that's something that I've been aware of for a long time. And it's that ability to not understanding the ramifications of the programming that that's being given to them or being delivered.
I also think we have to be really careful, because something that I'm very conscious of, and I am definitely taking moral courage to talk about this right now, is that some people, particularly when it comes to things like eating disorders and RED-S, the academics, some of the practitioners who are working in it, they come in it again from a place as n equals 1. They're interested in it because they know they have issues. And obviously that's fine, because you obviously want to prevent other people from doing it. But I will ask you the question, and obviously I'm asking it to you, Chris, but it's to everybody who's listening as well. Do you think, if you have a dysfunctional relationship with exercise and food yourself, you are in a position to give responsible advice to somebody who has a dysfunctional relationship with food and exercise? And I have real issues with that, because I am seeing that a lot, that there are women giving out advice about menstrual cycles when they don't have a menstrual cycle. There are women who are in low energy availability providing advice to women in low energy availability, but yet they're not doing it themselves. And something I've been incredibly proud of, and I really respect you for saying this to me, is that you always say this to me, Rena, you're a really good role model to the people that you work with. And I've always tried to be like, I've got 2 daughters, so I have to be I think a good, strong female role model, full stop. But I've always tried to practice what I preach, and I genuinely do. I eat really well, I do train hard, but I have a regular period. I know when to rest. I have a beer when I need it. You know, I'm incredibly relaxed about my approach to my exercise and food, but also, you know, enjoy it and work hard when I need to. And I guess I'm really struggling with this, and I think hopefully you can hear it in my voice. I am really, really struggling with people giving out advice when they are in the same position. It makes me really sad.
I'm going to support you there because, you know, as I said, I think you're an amazing role model in that respect, because you have thousands of people, men and women, looking at you, and, you know, you're not strutting around half naked. You know, that's the first thing. Like, you know, like it's, you know, when we talk about body image and body awareness, you know, like, and how hard it is for a lot of people to kind of manage those emotions. We all have it. You know, we've all got any of those insecurities, and to have these people talking about how important it is to have good body image, and, you know, and they're strutting around half naked, especially, and it drives me, it makes me so angry, because those individuals definitely aren't working face to face with people, because you would not be behaving like that. You would not be flaunting it like that. You would be, actually, if you truly are you respect your position, if you were working with individuals as a professional, you'd be, you'd stand, you know, you'd be talking more than you'd be showing, if you know what I mean. So you are fantastic at that. You always have been. You have to, I mean, you have to, you've got life, you know, you in your social media, you show lifestyle, you show yourself training, but you are constantly aware with you and your team about how you present yourself, because you, again, it's the ramifications. You know that within a week that there's those individuals that see you are going to be back and probably sitting in front of you, and you can't, you know, it's just not, you know, you know the power that you wield. And we are surrounded with people who are coaches, or in inverted commas coaches, who are self-proclaimed, but half the time they spend running around half naked to a group of people, preying, I'm going to say it, preying on a group of people who are vulnerable, they're just trying to leech off them, and they're not actually educating them and showing them what they, how to behave. They're just showing them a vision of what that isn't really sustainable. And again, it's again, that's probably one of our biggest bugbears between me and you, isn't it? That we see these people day to day, and we have these conversations day to day, face to face, Zoom to Zoom, and it's, you can't, you just, to behave that way, to flaunt yourself, to show you're not empowering that individual whatsoever. You're confusing them. You are belittling. You know, you're just creating so much chaos in their mind that you're not helping them at all. You can, and that again, just by standing there half naked, saying the right words isn't inspiring. That you're completely confusing that individual.
Yeah, I mean, there are some very good people out there who do practice what they preach, and we're not saying everybody, but I think I'm just becoming increasingly frustrated, because I suppose at the end of the day, Instagram is a popularity contest, and so the people that are already popular, maybe they want more popularity, and they don't want to, like, again, like as Kimberly was saying, people are not standing up and saying what is actually true, what is actually right. And I think actually last week you asked me the question, like, what's the characteristic you don't like in someone? And I think I said to you gluttony, because that's what you'd said. But actually, when I went away and walked away from that, do you know what actually for me is being disingenuous? That is huge for me. Really, really big. Like saying something but doing the complete opposite. I'm not okay with that. But that's personal. And I agree that other people might not have the same conscience as me, but I am not okay with that. Like, I will always be honest, and I have always been honest. And some, you know, sometimes people don't want to hear that, but that's what it is. But I guess the other thing I want to explain to people is that no one size fits all. Chris has said that a few times today, and I just want to give you like an understanding of that, because, you know, I see people in clinic every single day, and yes, they all come from different backgrounds and lifestyles, and different places of where their starting point is. one of the reasons that I put them in front of Chris is because I need to understand their physical screening, their physical strength, their physical assessment of what's going on for them. We do bloods for the same reason, to find out what is it that's actually going on for that person internally, because you can't just work on subjective information that, yeah, I feel fine and I'm capable and I can go and run 300 miles this week. You can't work on that. You can't. So we have to be, we do have a scientific approach, and we use research. Like I said, there's some very, very good research coming through about how to incorporate training back into somebody's life when they've had low energy availability, when they've had an eating disorder. And it's, you have to tick box on several things, like the physical monitoring, psychological monitoring. You know, like we've had a number of individuals who we have had to stop going back to training, even though physically they are tick green, but mentally they're not ready. And we know they're not ready because you ask a number of questions, you do the screening, and they're still too obsessive. They can't do training for the sake of participating. They have to train and push all out, which means that if we're not careful, if that's not managed well, then actually they go back into the red. And that's not what we are about. We are about creating sustainable athletes. And, you know, finally, just to guys, to let you know, we are constantly getting feedback from our clients, always. Like, we're not just all right, here you go, here's your plan, see you later, guys.
Yeah.
No, we are constantly, like, the number of emails that we both receive and the number of messages that we both receive on a daily basis, you know, it's one of the reasons I've had to expand my team, because I'm now at a point where I can't deliver to everybody that wants to work with me. And so I've, you know, handpicked some really good people who are going to deliver in the same way as me, because they're learning from me, which is really important. But I've taught you, Chris, about things to pick up on. Like we've had conversations about what questions should you ask, how should you do the screening, like what are things, what are red flags, and the thing is, the feedback is also what helps us to then decide what to do next. But also, it's really important for that individual. So like Chris and I will probably go, like, maybe you've had somebody in the gym, and they've done their gym session. They usually then go and get something like some recovery, and then they have to come and see me. That's kind of how we tend to work it. So your post gym session, you'll be going, how was that? How do you feel? And they'll be usually like, yeah, I feel great, and I feel really strong, and da-da-da. I'll then go, so how did you do the recovery? Yeah, I had a banana, or whatever it might be. Okay, well, you worked really hard in the gym. Why have you just had a banana? And then they'll discuss their anxieties and their concerns. And that is then how we decide what steps happen next.
It's that process, isn't it? I mean, it's the process. Yeah. What we're saying is that you cannot do this on your own. What we do, we couldn't really do it effectively on our own. Like, we've realized this over the last year, is like, my job is like to train someone without knowing where their bloods are at, where they're physically at, physically, are they balanced, have I screened them, have I checked their bloods? And then now, like, we're bringing into obviously play where's their mind at. There's obviously red flags that you pick up as a coach, but there's no guesswork. There is no guesswork. Then this is what we're saying, is there's so much guesswork going on out there, and people just throwing information around. There's no systems, process, no network that you're kind of. And this is what we work so hard on, and we want it's not something that is exclusive. It's something that should be done across the board. It should be systemic. Like, we want people to be working. And this is probably what's not happening, is most coaches work independently. They don't have these strong networks that they're integrating with. If you've got someone's got a niggle, straight away they should have a physio on call. They should, and then every single person that I work with, I had someone come to me the other day, and they were like super keen to train, pumped, ready to go. All I had to do was just give them a program, and they would have been gone. Easy. However, ding ding ding, like, just for a conversation, lots of things were there. Boom, straight in contact with Rini, because I was like, okay, we need to just dig a little bit deeper here, because as a responsible coach, I knew there was a lot more there than just giving a program. And that is the level that you should be expecting from your coach. You shouldn't just be expecting just to kind of blow over things or blow past things. Like, you know, if you've got a niggle, you should be working with a physio to find out what that is. Let's get a rehab program in place. If it's a few red flags there in terms of lifestyle habits, or like your mood, or however your relationship with food, etc., you should be talking with someone like Rini or a team. You know, there's so much that comes with being a coach that is more than just you, than just that individual. And you as an athlete have every right to have that type of team around you. Okay, and because that's the only way. It's the only way you're going to have a sustainable sporting career, or a sustainable lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, because it's those relationships with multiple people, a team around you, that's going to allow you to keep growing and stay healthy. Yeah, I think that's what we're really trying to get across here, guys.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, like, you know, again, I mean, I'm going back to the people that are providing advice when they've got their own issues, and maybe they haven't worked through their issues. Now I know a lot of people say, yeah, but you've had an eating disorder, Rini. I was like, yeah, when I was 13. I'm 44 now, right? Like I've worked through my stuff. I've done different jobs. I've come back into this field of disordered eating disorders, because I know it's something I can help with, because I know what's going on.
Can I say, you
Yeah.
really not perfect, by the way, guys, right? Like, and I'm not perfect. Like, we all have our moments where we have, like, you know, we have look in the mirror, we have self-doubts, we have, like, you know, like, we're not sure. Like, and that's what discussion's about. That's what we know, you know, process, you know, the ability to understand your own mindset, your thoughts, and be able to step outside them. So there's no perfection here. That's all, you know?
Yeah, no, and I've been honest with you guys. I have moments still where I'm working through my inadequacies. But what I'm saying is, when you're absolutely in it, or even when you're functional as an eating disorder, and I would say probably, like, if I 20 years ago, when I first qualified as a dietitian, I probably wasn't in the right headspace to work with people with eating disorders. Definitely. And I didn't, because we weren't allowed to be fair. You know, we had to get all the clinical experience. We had to do those 7 years before we could specialize in anything. So, like, if you are fearful of food yourself, if you are somebody who actually has an exercise dependency, which is a diagnosable condition, like, you know, orthorexia is still not diagnosable. We don't have the criteria. We don't have the criteria, and so we, you know, we have to kind of guess. We have to use our clinical experiences. So there's no, it's not in the DSM manual in terms of diagnosis, whereas exercise dependency is. And actually, you know, the latest studies have shown that figures in the US, 3% of the adult population have an exercise dependency, and the highest tends to be in triathletes and endurance runners. So, you know, that's a lot of people we're working with, right? And I know that's the US, but the figures will be similar in the UK. But if you are individuals who have a dependency on exercise, and you know you've got a slightly warped relationship with food, and that's okay, no one's pointing the finger, you just know you have, you're not in a place to be able to say to somebody, actually, you need to rest, and you need to, you know, eat like this. You need to give them an example, because if you have fear of food, you won't be able to provide them with the practical information that they need.
You lack the ability to step outside the box. Like, you lack the ability to step back, and that's what you see on a daily basis. Again, you see a lot of is these, you know, coaches who are exercise dependent themselves. You know, they are athletes first and coaches second, and I'm probably going to, you know, a lot of people are going to be a bit angry about hearing that, but I see it all the time, and they just apply the principles that they do themselves to their athletes without enough care. They do, obviously there is due care, there's not enough care, there's not enough thought processes in terms of, like, recovery, in terms of should they even be doing that currently, have they checked X, Y, and Z yet to allow them to do that, you know, are they, and so there's so much there that isn't being done because of those because of they're kind of, what's the word, they're kind of portraying their own issues onto their athletes. And I don't care, like, what people think, because I've been working a decade now with endurance sport, and the statistic you just said there, that is what coaches leverage right now, that exercise dependency, and they leverage that, and they just apply load and intensity at will, and they'll service their clients, but they won't stop enough to go, should I Is that enough? Is that too much? Has that person been having enough with the right conversations with the right people to make sure that they are being sustainable? I don't care if you're hitting a new FTP. I don't care if you're progressing your numbers, because if the underlying current is that your health is diminishing even quicker, then you're a poor coach, and the power that you're wielding it poorly. And that you've got to have that correlation. If you really are a successful coach, what you'll see is a wonderful trajectory of progression of performance, and a lovely, healthy underlying tone. Periods. Like good relationship with your family, good relationship with your partner, good, like so many other things. And it's easy to apply load. It's easy to train someone hard. Okay, what's not easy is being a great coach, creating a great, maintaining a sustainable lifestyle, and training lifestyle.
And I think, like, just, to kind of end on a really positive note, like, we obviously, Chris and I have worked really, really hard to get this message out. Like, I started the podcast talking about moral courage, and one of the things I hope the Train Brave podcast has been that talking about things that people are not talking about, providing people with the information that they need to hear but maybe don't want to hear it. And by doing so, actually, we do also get some really good things. Like, for example, we've got some local running coaches that have worked with us, and they've kind of joined our pathway as such. And one of them messaged me the other day and said, I've just taken on a new female athlete. She's 41. She seems to think she's going through the early menopause, but from everything I've learned from you, I think this could be Red-S. What should I do? What are the steps I should take? Like, what are the bloods I should get her to have from her GP? That, to me, is why we do what we do. That is a coach who's gone, do you know what? I could just run this woman into the ground and get her the results she's looking for, and she'd probably break. Or, oh, I've actually picked up on something here, and she's 41. She could still keep on running for another 20 years, and really, really well. I want to help her do that. And so I'm going to use my network, and I'm going to use the fact that this is probably not my area of expertise, but I want to help this person. It's like, for my sake, when I hit a boundary, like, I'm not a psychologist, and I don't try and pretend to be one. I understand the psychology of food. I understand the psychology of an eating disorder. And I understand psychology of overtraining, because I've studied that. But when it comes to trauma, apart from having gone through my own trauma, I don't know how to help somebody who's been through trauma, and that's not my job. So I would always say at that stage, your trauma is probably the reason you're running away from everything, and that's why you're putting those coping mechanisms into place. And while we can help you with that, and we can change your beliefs around that, you still need to go and work on that trauma, and that you need to go and work with somebody who's qualified to do that. Like, we all need to know where we draw the line, and move on to somebody else, and we don't have to be experts in everything.
But it takes a maturity, though, doesn't it? Like, it takes it's easy for us to say that, but like, for me, it makes my job so much easier. And I think I've said this point before, like, just as soon as I know my boundaries, so it's as soon as I you have an understanding of different areas. I have an understanding of what kind of Red-S looks like. But that does not put me in a position to sit down with that individual and drill down on that. But that's that point where you go, right, excellent. Well, I would like you to have a conversation with Rini, or I'd like to have a conversation. Let's get your bloods done, and let's take this conversation further, but not with your team. So it's that. But it does take a level of maturity. It does take a level of, like, confidence in yourself as an individual, and it is something learned. But those individuals that you're talking about, these coaches, we have some great ones locally here that we work with who know the right, they constantly want to know more about things, so they can adapt the programming, whether they're working with junior athletes, postmenopausal athletes. There is difference. But the thing is, as soon as you start thinking like that, it's the new way, it's the new age. It's taking all this amazing information that we have at our fingertips, and actually learning how to apply it, and not just spout it on an infographic, and then just carrying on in your own obsessive ways on behind closed doors. Like, true coaches, you really get to see that they are able to expand and work with and confidently work in other, with other people in other areas. So it's easy for us. I guess it is easy for us to say it, but it does. It takes a level of maturity and allows you have to take a step back from what you're doing and have a confidence to be able to reach out to other people.
Yeah, 100%. On a slightly different note, apologies today from my end if you heard any sort of weird noise. Bailey has been through nettles today, which means that he has a really bad reaction to nettles. So he has been running up and down the stairs for the duration of the recording. So hopefully you don't hear it, but if you do, I do apologize. This is one of the real barriers of working from home that is now starting to really get to me. But yes, it is our reality right now. Anyway, guys, on that note, we really do hope you have found this podcast episode helpful, and also really hope it's raised some awareness and importance in where you're getting your information from. Next week is going to be our last episode of this series 2. And then we're going to take a few weeks off before we bring series 3, and we've got some really exciting ideas for series 3, so we'll let you know about that next week. But for next week, we thought it'd be really nice to end on a kind of a Q&A. What do you want to know from us? Like, it can be anything from obviously training, nutrition, Red S. You can ask us personal questions if you want, but I think you've had those last week, so hopefully you don't need to know any more about us. But if you want to, you can, about our professions, about how George is getting on, about Bailey and his weird nettle phobia issues. Anything you want, let us know. We'll probably put a little question box up on our Instagrams anyway. But if there's something you really desperately want to ask us, you know where to find us. You can DM either myself or Chris, or email us, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can. But we usually get loads, so we'll do our very best. But for now, have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
Speak soon, guys.